I the asshole for what I said after my husband commented on my flat chest? My husband, Jared. I don't know. What if she said something really bad? It could have been really mean. You're about to see.
But that doesn't justify commenting on someone's body.
This is true. My husband, Jared, and I have been married for 3 years. He's currently out of work, used to work at a high-paying job, but got kicked out of the company over a fight with a coworker, and I'm the one paying for rent and utilities. We dedicate some time to seeing his family weekly. They don't know he's unemployed because he thought they'll see him as a failure, especially his mom, so he told me to keep it a secret. Last night, we were sitting, eating dinner at the table. His cousin was talking about his fiancée going to Brazil to do a boob job. Jared asked if he was serious, then flattered future sister-in-law's boobs, saying they're perfect and that he didn't understand why she'd get a boob job. He then turned to me, stared at my chest while I was eating. I have a flat chest. I'm insecure about it, but don't do anything about it, obviously, and said, quote, "Hey, why don't you get a boob job? You're the one who needs it the most." His mom gasped and was like, "Jared." I then turned to him and said, quote, "I'll get a boob job once you get an actual job since you've been unemployed for 6 months now." He stared at me in
Honestly,
disbelief.
like he deserves it.
His mom began questioning him about being unemployed, and he denied. Then
He kept lying.
admitted it was true. It got awkward with his mom scolding him and others shaming him for it and for hiding it. He got so overwhelmed he went outside and stayed inside the car until I came out. He started yelling at me repeatedly, quote, "You couldn't have held your f***ing tongue." I argued that his comment about my chest was insulting, but he said he was giving me a piece of advice and that there's nothing wrong with him wanting me to look pretty and that he said what he said.
So he doesn't think she looks pretty?
He said what he said out of support and encouragement, but what I did was the complete opposite, and that it was intended to hurt him, and I succeeded. I called him later thinking he calmed down, but his friend said he didn't want to speak to me and I should give him space.
I feel like she should get divorced.
Give him all the space in the world.
He's obviously a very insecure person.
Well, all of this is like
he's
his own
reactive.
making.
He's a
Yeah.
reactive person. And my guess is his reactive personality comes from this insecurity whenever he gets challenged or, the type of person who would call their wife flat chested in public and then make it about I guess essentially gaslight them into making him feel like he was trying to do her a favor.
Yeah. I was supportive.
Yeah.
I was trying to make you the prettiest you can be.
When people call in for my Ask Nick segments, I would ask her, tell me what you're grateful for in the relationship and tell me how he makes you feel.
Yeah.
I doubt she'd have a long list of things that she's grateful for.
Storytime about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. I'll tell you that last month I made $60,000. It's clear this is not my story time and sending me on Instagram. So at the beginning I had to lie about my age. I'm really 36 years old, but I say I'm 22. I do look a lot younger than I am, and of course I get filler and Botox. I started my Instagram account 6 years ago. My inspirations were Anna Cherie, Amanda Lee, Sam Jojo, and Abigail Ratchford. I mean Abigail Ratchet. I basically copied all of these girls' pictures. Within a month of starting my Instagram account I had 10,000 followers. And yes, all of them were males. But I didn't really start making money until 2018. Like every other girl on Instagram, I signed up for OF. And that's when I started making serious money. But I was also making money from Instagram. Brands would send me clothes and watches and protein powders, stuff like that. Eventually, I became an ambassador for one of the biggest Instagram clothing stores. I think we all know what I'm talking about. Fashion Hova, and I started making a lot of money then. So I basically started living above my means. I got myself a new apartment in Beverly Hills, and it was $6,000 a month. I also got myself a Mercedes, and I would exclusively shop at Air One. I would also go shopping at Rodeo Drive almost every day because I wanted the paparazzi to get pictures of me. And I even called the paparazzi on me a few times, so I had to pay them like $2,000 out of pocket. So yeah, I was spending a lot of money. Whatever money I got that month, I would literally spend it by the end. One month I spent $25,000 going out with friends. I would usually pick up the bill. This is what started getting me into trouble. Part 2 is story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. After I spent the $25,000 in 1 month, I decided I needed another income source. So I thought of escorting. One of my very good friends in LA was also an escort, and she told me about it, but I was like, I can't do that. But one day I called her and she told me everything. She gets contacted through Instagram by very, very rich men, like billionaires. I honestly didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me receipts. Her bank account had more than $1 million in it. She told me that she had only been doing it for 6 months. She put me in contact with several people and they had to verify a bunch of my stuff. Then after a week, I was finally in. But I was really scared. I had to go get my passport renewed. This meant that I was going to be traveling internationally with men that I didn't know. A few days later, I get a message on Instagram from an account. The guy that owned this account was clearly very rich. It wasn't him contacting me, it was his assistant. He got my information and 2 days later, I was on a private plane. I landed in a foreign country. I spent the entire weekend with this guy. He didn't speak English. Basically took me around his city and showed me off for his friends. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point and he didn't try anything. In fact, he was actually super shy, but his friends on the other hand were really handsy. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how I became an Instagram model / escort for billionaires. That's when his friends started getting really handsy. We were in a really expensive high-rise and the apartment was literally worth millions. And I knew that all of these guys were used to getting whatever they wanted. One of the friends actually grabbed my arm and told me to sit on his lap, but I told him I couldn't. He wasn't the one that hired me to be there, so I had to go straight to the guy that hired me. I told him that his friends were making me uncomfortable and he said, okay, we should leave then. I was actually shocked that he listened to what I wanted. Now one of my regular clients and I travel with him almost every 2 months. So let me tell you how much he paid me. For the 3-day weekend, I ended up with $50,000. Yep, that's right. But let me tell you a little about the dark side of this. A few jobs later, I ended up with somebody who was completely crazy. I ended up going to Vegas with this guy. He was approximately 10 years younger than me and was filthy rich. But he was also a complete psycho. He bought me this whole outfit that he wanted me to wear the entire night. I told him I was more comfortable in my clothes. I was wearing a Fendi dress. It looked great. That's when he said, no, you're gonna wear this. I ended up walking around Vegas in a micro mini skirt and a bikini top. By the end of this night, he was getting really aggressive. I tried to stay quiet, hoping that he would just forget that I was in his car. Suddenly, he turned to look at me and wanted me to do something. When I said no, he grabbed me by the hair and told me that he owned me for the night. Then he said, I'll add an extra $20,000 in there for you. And it does get worse. But now I learned to save my money. I no longer pay for my friends' drinks and food. I still have my $6,000 apartment and I upgraded my car. I live like a princess. I also bought my parents a house though. It was definitely one of the happiest days of my life. And believe it or not, I actually did end up finding love. My boyfriend is okay with my job, but he just asked me to be safe. Of course, he asked me every day to quit because he wants to support me, but he can't give me the life I've given myself. What should I do?
Am I wrong for using my now husband's diary to get him to fall in love with me? My husband and I had been married for a few years now. We went to the same high school. I was a little weird in high school and he was a lot more popular than I was, and I had a really big crush on him, but I knew I had no chance. One day in class, I asked to go to my locker to get my homework, and my locker was really close to his, and I noticed that his locker didn't have a lock on it. And I know this was a complete invasion of privacy, but I was very curious, so I looked inside of his locker. When I looked in his locker, I found this notebook, and as I was reading through this notebook, it sounded like a diary. He wrote about his life and all the things that he loved and his hobbies and what was going through his mind. I basically hit the jackpot because I had a huge crush on him. So I took the notebook and I went inside the bathroom. I took out my phone and I took pictures of every single page inside his diary. Then I put his notebook back into the locker where I found it. My sneaky little self started messaging him through social media, and as we were talking, he seemed to really like me because we were so similar and had all the same interests. I was the perfect girl for him. 5 years later, he still doesn't know that I used his diary to make him fall in love with me.
Am I the asshole for banning my sister and her young children from my home? Disclaimer, this is not my story. My sister, Emily, and her late husband have adopted 5 young children in the span of 3 years, each from a different country. They had plans to continue to adopt children and expand their growing family. Unfortunately, Emily's husband passed away a month ago very suddenly. I'm not very close with Emily, but I have tried to visit her as much as I can. One of the reasons I'm not close with her is her odd treatment to my wife, Rosa. Rosa is deaf and wears a cochlear. My family, but more so Emily, has a habit of asking very insensitive questions about deafness and Rosa. Rosa has tried to be patient and understanding, but sometimes the questions are too much for her. She and I want to educate Emily, but the questions can be uncomfortable at times. Rosa gave birth to our very first child 6 months ago. The birthing experience was very traumatic for her. We expected to have a healthy delivery, but there were some complications. My family, including Emily, was well aware of Rosa's situation. This past weekend, Rosa wanted to take Emily out for a girls' day free of kids and full of relaxation. I paid for the day's activities in full and helped Emily arrange childcare. When the day came, Emily arrived at our house an hour and a half before Rosa was expecting her. Because she arrived so early, I was still in the house helping prepare for the day. Rosa offered her a cup of tea and they began chatting about small things. Emily mentioned how hard it must be for Rosa to be a mother given what she's gone through. She said you should give the baby to someone who can take care of it better while gesturing to herself. Someone who doesn't have physical limitation and isn't fake depressed. I told her to fuck off and to never be in my house again. She protested, but I showed her the door. My family heard about this and is calling me heartless for treating Emily so bad after she lost her husband.
Am I wrong for not telling my husband I went into labor? I, 32 female, have 3 kids. K, 12 female, L, 4 female, and I just gave birth to my beautiful baby girl, Valerie. My husband and I have been married for 5 years, and I love him, but he's a little bit of a mama's boy. My mother-in-law hates me. I grew up in a richer neighborhood, and my parents left me with quite a lot of inheritance when they passed, about 13 million in assets. Mother-in-law, however, was a single mother with 2 sons and had a lot of trouble just paying for basic needs. She worked her way up, and I think she's very strong. She doesn't like me and thinks I'm pretentious because apparently I had everything handed to me. Well, when I got pregnant with Elle, we decided to name him Luke, after my husband's father, who died when my husband was only 3. Mother-in-law was through the roof when we told her, but ever since I fell pregnant again with Valerie, she has been adamant that we would name her Francine after her late grandmother. My husband wants to as well, but I don't. Instead, I wanted to name her Valerie, and not just because I like the name, but also because when I was 17, the song Valerie by Amy Winehouse came out, and me and my family would sing it all the time. At family gatherings, it was always first on the speaker, car rides, and just in general. It was basically our song. Well, my older sister and my parents passed away in a house fire 3 years ago, and I miss them terribly. We were all a very close family, so it hit me and my younger sister very hard. When I suggested this to my husband and mother-in-law, they actually got mad at me because they wanted it to be Francine. I suggested we name her Valerie with the middle name Francine, or Francine with the middle name Valerie, but they weren't happy with either. During my last month of pregnancy, my husband has become more angry with me. I finally snapped and said that I wasn't going to name my child an ugly name that I don't like for the sake of a woman that doesn't even like me. He said that I was being unbelievable and that I had insulted his strong, independent mother. I immediately apologized, but he left to his mother's house. 2 days later, I couldn't reach him at all, and on the 3rd day I went into labor, Kate kept saying she would text my husband, and I told her not to bother. After hours of labor and awful pain, I gave birth to my baby girl and named her Valerie with Diana as the middle name. Diana was my mother's name. About 2 hours after I gave birth, my younger sister was able to reach my mother-in-law to get the message to my husband. When they came in, my husband was raging and yelling at me, calling me a pretentious, backstabbing bitch, and mother-in-law was more upset about the name. I think this might be the end of my marriage, but we can still change her name if I really wanted to. So, am I the asshole? Should I just change the name?